Hello everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to build nice validated forms in React. And by nice, I mean forms that provide great user experience. Let us start with a very simple form. We have email, password, repeated password, and a register button. Now, interestingly, when some of my colleagues in Vacuum Labs is presented with a task like this to validate a form like this, they usually say, I don't need any library for this. React and Redux provide a great architecture. We gather all the data from the application in one application state, and therefore it's easy to just apply some validating functions to this application state, and then produce HTML code that contains these validations. For example, here we have two functions that validate email address, and then we just adjust the render method, and we apply the functions to the email value, and then adjust the style of the input according to whether it's valid or not. Easy, right? Well, not so fast. When you implement a naive approach like that, this is what happens. You open the form, and you already have these red errors there. And that's not cool, because I have just opened the form, I know the fields aren't valid, I don't need to see the errors now. It is technically right, the empty email address isn't an email address, however, it's not good from the user experience point of view. The user doesn't need to see the errors now. So what should we do? We should add some rule to see the form like this. We want to hide the validity if the field wasn't touched yet. So let's add this rule and let's see what happens next. Did you see it? The form doesn't contain any errors when I open it. However, as soon as I start typing, again I have this problem. I know I'm not finished. I'm just entering the email address, so don't bother me with this please enter a valid email thing. So this is not enough. And also, there is another problem. When the validations take some time to compute, then you may be displaying some I'm still validating message, and then it might look even worse. It might be blinking between two states. This is totally not pleasant for the user. So what do? We should wait until the user stops typing and only then display the error message. And this is usually done in the following way. We just wait until user leaves the field, and then we update the validity. Something like this. I entered Marcela, that's not a valid email, so I get back to return it, to finish it. And did you see it? I started typing again, but the red message stays there, it doesn't disappear. And even if I entered correct email address, the error message stays there. That's not good either. That's even more wrong than the previous. So what can we do about this? We can update validity on blur, but hide it once again I resume typing into the field. Like this. That's better. However, notice that when I stopped typing and there was a correct email address, I'd like to see some validation message. Now it's clear I stopped typing, but there is no validation message. So we need to change this rule to once again. And what is the best thing we can do? We can detect whether the user is typing or not, and if he or she is typing, then we hide the validation message. If he is not typing, that means if enough time passed after last keystroke, we show the error message. And also we need to remember that we need to show the error message immediately on blur. So this is the final form of rule 2. Once we have solved this issue, let's fill out the password and submit the form. However, we have another issue here. I have filled out 2 fields, everything's green, everything looks nice, but the alert says that there are some errors in the form. And now I would really like to see where the error is, but I don't see it. And the problem is that this field, this repeated password, was never touched, so the error message wasn't shown. And since this is not good, we need to add another rule. We should show all the validation messages on the submit, when submit happens. Like this. Okay. So now, I think you'll agree with me that even though computing validity is easy, displaying validity correctly is not. And by displaying validity, I mean guessing correctly, guessing when the user wants to see the validation message, and when you should hide the message because it will just bother the user, when it's just annoying and when it's useful information that helps the user to fill out the form. And as I said, finding out the actual validity, thanks to React and Redux, this one is easy because we have all the data in the application state and we just apply some functions to this data, right? Well, again, no. It is easy when you have synchronous functions that just return some true or false. However, sometimes it may happen that you might, if you want to find out whether some email address is used or not, you might want to make a request to a server, and then you have async functions, and it opens a whole new set of problems. For example, race condition. Here I'm entering an email address. I have 3 different values. I send 3 different requests. And if the responses come in different order and you are not careful enough, you may end up showing this one as the last response, as the last validity. You may end up showing that this correct email address is incorrect. Also, if you are sending requests with each type, with each change of the input field value, you may end up sending way too many requests to the server, and this might be completely unnecessary. For example, now, it is easy to save some resources, right? I don't have to ask the server stupid questions like, is M a used email address? Because M is not an email at all, right? And even if it was, I wouldn't be able to use it because it's not a valid email address. It wouldn't pass other validations. So just ask the server only those questions that you really need to know the answers to. And that means first compute the synchronous validations, those that you can on client, and only then send some requests to the server. And also, you can throttle server validations, and it is even better if this amount of throttling is adjustable, and then you can adjust it according to how precious your resources are. And if you do this right, then you can tremendously reduce the amount of requests that you are sending. Now I don't need to ask anything, and even now when there is a correct email address, there is a request sent. Now if I am typing quickly, nothing is sent, and only when I am finished typing, another request is sent. Finally, it is a good idea to separate calculating the actual validation results, whether the form input field, whether the entered value is valid or not, and calculation of when to show or hide the validation results. And this is good because when you finally want to show the validation message to the user, it's not a good idea to start calculating the validation message only then. It is good to start as soon as you can with respect to saving your resources. And then when you want to show the result to the user, it's great when you have ready the result. So you should treat these two separately. By now, and this is a special notice for my vacuum colleagues, I think you all agree with me that it is a good idea to use some client-side validation library because it can help a great deal. And the main focus of this library should be on recommending you whether to show or hide the validation messages, and it should also help you handling these async validations. Now, when you need some library, you look whether such library is already there. We tried to find a library like this. However, we weren't happy with anything that we found. And there were many issues. Either there were some bugs, or we didn't like the API, or the design. So what we did, we decided to build our own library. That's what I did. You can find it here on NPM or GitHub. And I think it should be clear by now from what was said, but as it is really important, I will repeat it once again. This is a client-side library, and the main purpose of this library is to give you show and hide recommendations about whether to show or hide the error message to the user. And it also helps you with synchronous and asynchronous validations, with finding out handling calculations. However, it doesn't provide the validation rules. There are some few simple examples, but you are supposed to write these validation rules yourself, because many rules are very specific to the business logic of your app. Or there are some standard rules, but these are already implemented in some other libraries, so there is no need to reinvent this. And finally, this is not for server-side validations. This library is not intended for the validations that you do when, for example, someone submits some form and the data come to the server, and now you have to check if everything's all right, and only then you save the new user to the database. So these checks before adding something to the database, that's something you just need some functions to apply to the data, and that's nothing, you don't need a library for that, you just really need to apply a function to data. So this is just the client-side library. Now let us look at how this library works. As a developer, need to provide some validation rules, which are synchronous or asynchronous functions. These rules can return a promise. And you also need to provide information about field events, whether there was some change or blur or submits. And the library, in turn, provides information on validity, whether a validation is okay, not okay, or whether it's still in progress. It gives you show and hide suggestions for all the validations, and it also provides a very handy submit handler. This is a function that you can call in the following situation. Imagine that you have a form, a user filled out all the fields really quickly, and she hit the submit button. Now, the validations are still in progress, so what do you want to do? You want to wait until the validations are finished, and then according to whether they are okay or not, you want to run either some onValid handler or some onInvalid handler. And this submit function, it helps you do exactly this. Let us now look at the code. If you want to use the library, you need to define a function like this. It takes properties, React component properties as an argument, and it returns an object. The most important part of the object is this validations part. We have 3 validations here: email, password, and passwords match. Note that this last one, it doesn't validate a single field, but it checks whether 2 fields are same. So multiple field validations are really straightforward here. And let us look at these email rules. There are 3 rules, and each rule is given by a list. The first item in the list is a function, and all the other arguments in the list are its arguments. All other items in the list are its arguments. So the function is just applied to the other items of the list. This is a Lisp-like notation if you know it. Apart from these rules, you may or may not provide this on-validation handler. It is called whenever there is some new data. For example, if the validation library needs to tell you that you should show that email validation, or that that password isn't strong enough, or something like this, this on-validation handler is called, and you are told this new data, and you are in charge of saving this data to your app state, or dispatching them, or doing whatever you want according to what your architecture is. If you don't want to implement this handler, there will be also another possible use. You will get this validation data as a property to the React component. Also, you need to say what fields the validation depends on. In this case, we have email password and repeated password. So that's the validation config. And now, when you are writing the code of the form, and here we have an input for the email address, you also need to inform the library about the field events, as I said before. And this is done in the following way. In the onChange and onBlur, you need to call this field event, like here. And since this is quite a lot of writing, there is some shortcut for this, but I just thought this is more explicit, so I'm showing you a little bit more code. But if you check out the API, you'll find it out. Last, to put it all together, you just need to decorate the registration form with this validated decorator, and you get a validated form. Or if you are using Redux, you are probably already using many other decorators, so you just need to compose this one decorator together with the other decorators, and that's it. Finally, when we managed to register and pass all the validations, let us look at what the app does. Let us do some math. I'll refresh it. So this here, that's an app that validates these math problems. Notice that this is a multiple field validation. There is this operation that I can change here, and the validation is automatically recalculated. If I change any of the fields, again, validation is recalculated automatically. I can add more. We are using asynchronous validations that take some time because we are sending all these calculations to the server. I have heard there is some issue with Samsung devices. They tend to explode under some conditions, so we don't want to overload them, just to be sure. Now, if I change the operation, it again was recalculated. Now I have some wrong results, so I still remember this one, but this one is too difficult. Just remove it, everything's correct. If I change something, now did you see it? It just waited until the result was ready, and then it says something wrong again. I correct it, hit check. And when the result is ready, the alert is shown. That's thanks to the submit handler I was talking about before. So to sum up, this library can help you to create beautiful validated forms with great user experience. It helps you with all these issues I was talking about. It solves all of them. And one last thing, maybe now you are thinking it does a nice job, but you need to add a lot of code if you want to use this library. So I have a couple of things to tell you about this. It's true, there is quite a lot of code you need to write. However, notice that there are many issues the library needs to solve, and there are many questions the library has. It's not easy to know what exactly you want, and that's why you need to write a few more lines of code. And second, you are right. It is, there might be some default behaviors defined that you would just use without writing some most common validations. And this is something I'm still working on. I'm trying to figure out what are the best defaults, and maybe in the future it will be a little bit less code when you want to use the library and just want the most default, most common behavior. And last, if you decide not to use this library because it's a lot of code and just use plain JavaScript, remember all these rules, and when you are at some rule 4 and debugging it and fighting with it, I think you'll be happy to add all those lines of code that validation config needs, just to avoid fighting with this anymore. That's it. Thank you for your attention. I'm looking forward to your feedback and to your questions.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So let's have a look at the questions. Why not just Redux form?
Well, so first, we wanted to build something that is independent of Redux. Our library can be used with Redux. However, it is independent. And a couple of months ago, we weren't using Redux, for example. We were using some other versions of Axe. And it was great. We could use this library that is very flexible and can be integrated with many other approaches. It is dependent on React, but that's the only hard dependence. Anything else is not necessary. And also, I don't know about Redux form in too much detail. However, if I remember it correctly, we didn't really like the abstractions they use. But I may want to talk about this later with someone who is interested.
So Arnold is asking, what changed in your approach since your last year's talk?
Many things.
Could you be more specific?
Sure. There were the show and hide recommendations I was talking about now. This was not really solved in all the cases last year. And now many corner cases are good. Last year, the status of this library was that it gives you some show and hide recommendations, and it is good in most of the cases, but it still had some quirks. And if you wanted really top-level user experience, you had to code a lot and put together the recommendations from this library with your own code, fix these corner cases. Now, I think I fixed all the corner cases, and the show and hide recommendations from the library are perfect for almost anything I know.
Do you have a good React form library to recommend?
This one.
Okay. I'm pretty sure there are libraries out there that are solving the problem already. Have you considered some? Why did you decide to go with your own solution? Milan is asking.
Well, I didn't do the research myself. My colleagues did it, but from most of the research. But from what I know, we couldn't find anything that would solve all these problems I was talking about, and that would not have any other bugs or design that is too coupled to some framework or other design problems.
How would you prevent race condition checking .co.com emails?
Well, the standard way how to do it, you just need to track which response is to which request, and then make sure you are showing the last response.
So with React, no one talks about element.set custom validating anymore. What's your opinion on native form validation?
Honestly, I don't know about this too much, so I cannot tell.
Do you support dynamic forms?
Of course, you have seen it.
Okay, that was
you can dynamically add and remove fields as you like, and it works. I have shown it in the end.
So, can you mention some specific problems you encountered with the other libraries?
As I said, sometimes you have bugs, sometimes it's tightly coupled with some framework, like in Redux form. Sometimes we just didn't like how it works, but most often I really couldn't like. Once again, this is not what I did personally, but from what I know, there is no library that would solve all those issues, that would give you show and hide recommendations on this level of detail, and also handle synchronous and asynchronous validations, and that would not be coupled with any framework apart from React.
Yeah, I think we have time for one last. Can you show a code example of the denounce when a user has stopped typing?
One? This?
Third one, yeah.
I think. Well, we are using streams from Rx.
Can I ask you to change the slides or the screen? Yeah, okay.
I can just show you the code of the library. Okay. So you can see it here. We use some stream for tracking all the changes that the user does, and then we just add debounce, and that's how we handle it. This is a stream where we put a new value anytime user types some letter.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. It looks like we're out of time. Thank you.